Okay, so one of the things, as you might have noticed, Richard, we've got people who already have a PhD, and some of who are actually academics as mentees this year.
Yeah.
And we've also got people who are teachers in secondary schools, and I think one in a primary school. And the reason why we brought all of this together is because we want to, the way, and you know this, the way we are, our focus here is actually professional development. We want to be able to support African teachers, our colleagues in Africa, to be reflective and critical practitioners, reflecting on their own practice and engaging with their students in ways that improve their pedagogy. And so we are not, it's not about academic research per se, and I'm not saying this to you because of course you know that. I'm saying this for everyone's benefit because I could see that people feel oh, we've got people who are already experts or not. In the case of Rita Bile, last year, for example, she was already an academic, but the reflecting, and I'm using her words, reflecting on her own professional practice in her classroom helped her to improve her own teaching and to engage more with her students. And that's actually what we want. So although at the end they'll be writing a report that reflects some of the stages of research, we are actually focusing on how they develop their practice together with their colleagues and their learners, and how they themselves can be agents of positive change in their classrooms and in their communities of practice. So it's my pleasure to, I would say honor actually, to introduce Professor Richard Smith. Professor Richard Smith and I come a very long way. He was my lecturer when I did my MA in 2006 at Warwick University, and he became my PhD supervisor and more like a mentor that he's continued to be over the years. And we first went to Cameroon in 2013 at the conference, the CAMELTA conference, where we started thinking about our ideas of teacher professional development and teacher research through teacher associations. And Richard was very central in helping CAMELTA set up what has now become the CAMELTA Research Group through his networking with teachers in Cameroon and data that we collected while he was in Cameroon. Richard supported us enormously in the last round when we had our first group of mentees. He very kindly ran our two first sessions, but more importantly, and no one always, we often forget this, that it's thanks to Richard's support that the Hornby Trust, well, in part Richard's support, of course, and his knowledge of the context, that the Hornby Trust supported Dr. Erike Kembe to be plenary speaker at the pre-conference event where we launched the Teacher Research Initiative in Nigeria. And beyond that, in his role within the IETFL Research Special Interest Group, he also did support us enormously to get funding to publish and print copies of the research report, which we are now distributing to the teachers who contributed and to mentors. So Richard has been around as I would say, from all of that, he probably doesn't call himself that, but he's been a very solid friend of Africa ELTA and has supported us in many different ways. And I thought this would be a forum to say it. And of course, in the future, when we celebrate the achievement of all of our mentees. So I would hand over now to you, Richard, for your session.
Okay, well, it's really, thank you very much, Harry. It's really nice to be reminded of those, that history, if you like, of how things have come to this. And it's very impressive that the book that came out from last year's experience, and now that you're doing this again, and it seems to be a sustainable thing. And you're right. I've been very interested in seeing how teacher associations can support teachers, just as you have, Harry. And I congratulate you and Amira and others from Africa ELTA on the way that it's developed. I think I've seen this develop over the last what, 5, 6, 7 years, or less, actually, and it seems to be really going well with Africa ELTA, with lots of different activities. So I'm very happy to be here again, just to help you to start off the process of helping teachers, some teachers, to do some research into their classrooms. I guess that is this the first time that you've all met together? Everyone has met together as a group?
Some of us met, some of the mentees, we met at the last virtual conference, and they have been meeting. Some have met with their mentors already, but this is the first time we are all together in one room, mentors and mentees. So yeah.
And so this is part of a process. This event today, this is not going to be a lecture, okay? Because I see this, what I'm doing here is part of a process which is between you and your mentors as teachers, mainly. So I'll just talk for a while, a little bit about the stage that I think we're at now, and my topic is developing research questions. Oh, could I share my screen, Harry, please? So the topic, I think the stage that we are at now is you have thought of the issues maybe that you'd like to be addressing as teachers, because Harry has sent me a list of your names and of the issues, problems, puzzles in your classrooms. And I think that you will be moving into trying to develop some questions out of your problems or puzzles. And the main way that you can do that is through dialogue with your mentor, through conversation with your mentor about your issue, and they will definitely help you to think what are my questions? What are my actual questions going to be? Because that's where research begins. Research begins with not just a problem, not just an issue or puzzle, but with questions, and it's questions which can take you forward. With problems, we seem often very much sort of stuck with problems, don't we? We all have problems as teachers, and we often feel kind of overloaded by problems, especially when you're teaching in quite what we call difficult circumstances, like, let's say, large classes, or low resource, maybe demotivated students, which can be very common. And we often, as teachers, feel quite overloaded by this and demotivated because our problems seem so heavy. But if we can help teachers to turn problems into questions, okay, then that can take us forward in exploring the problem, exploring the situation, and that leads us into new perspectives, on new views on our situation. It may not solve the problem in itself, but it will definitely help you to see the issues, see the problems in a new way, and it can lead into new actions which can help to improve situations. So I think that's the stage we're at. We're just at the stage of let me just find my slides. Where are they? They've disappeared. Oh, there they are. I think we're at the stage of developing exploratory research questions. At least I'm assuming that you're going to start to explore and not go straight into trying out some new idea, because I think that's the common basis, isn't it? That we're going to be exploring the situation before we go into trying to improve the situation. So I've got some just very basic PowerPoints, and I want to share an example from the book that has come out from the last example of this research process. You can find that. I'm sure you've seen the link for that. But I'd also actually like to invite Ritabile to share her experience if she doesn't mind. But let me just start with one example. I was just reading this before. This example comes the very first chapter. It's Annette from Nigeria, and her topic is dealing with students' lack of focus and engagement in my English class. So here is her problem. She feels her students are lacking engagement, lacking focus in her English class. It's a very common problem, isn't it? So there we are. A common challenge we have in this context is that of large classes and lack of resources. And sometimes these challenges make it difficult for students to be fully engaged in classroom activities. And Annette actually tried out many different strategies to deal with this. She tried group work. She tried giving lots of homework to students to try to get them engaged, but it didn't seem to be working. So together with her mentor last year, they explored this. They tried to think, well, what do you know the reasons why the students are not engaging? And it seemed that she didn't. She didn't know what the reasons were. She maybe had some ideas, but she wasn't sure. And not being sure about something, not being sure about the reasons for something, that's a really good starting point for research. So what she did, in fact, was this. I'll read it in order for me to understand better what was happening to my students. I decided to start by exploring the reasons behind their lack of focus and engagement with learning in class and at home. And at home, where I expected them to do their homework tasks. So she decided that she wanted to know what are the reasons why students don't focus? What are the reasons why students don't engage in class and at home? Today, we're not going to talk about how she did that, how she found out. We're talking about the questions. So the starting point question was, what are the reasons? Or what do students say are the reasons? Because we can't find reasons without asking students, asking parents. We could ask parents, but she asked the students. So what do students say are the reasons why they don't engage? Or what are the reasons students say they are interested sometimes? That's another question to ask. So I wanted to find out also, how can I adapt my teaching to their needs and interests? So another question was, what are students interested in? What do students say they are interested in? What do students say they would like to do in class? So these were the questions that started her research. Reasons and ideas from students about what to do in class. Questions, what are their reasons? What are their ideas? Simple. So it's not simple to find out the answers, but what she did was actually make a questionnaire and gave it to the students. So as I said, we're not going to talk about that so much, because in the next time I meet with you, we'll talk more about what can you do to find answers to the questions. She did a questionnaire. Let me briefly remember what she found from the questionnaire. She found that well, the main thing she emphasized was, I think this is a finding, that she saw the students as human beings not for the first time maybe, but she really started to see them as humans with individual reasons and individual ideas. That was, I think, reading her chapter, that was her main finding. And I think that's an important discovery, an important change in her, it sounded to me, from reading her chapter. Anyway, what she found more particularly was students were saying the topics were not interesting. Students were saying they felt shy to speak out in class, and that they said that there hadn't been enough talking in class about their challenges. I think they were grateful to be discussing this with her. So she said she moved from focusing on the language to focusing on topics, what topics might be interesting. And she wanted to focus also on providing more examples and illustrations for students based on something else they said, which was they didn't feel there were enough examples. And she also decided she would try to have more one-to-one interaction with some students, maybe the slow learners. Unfortunately, the pandemic interfered with her action plan, but she said that's what she would try to do as an action after finding out these discoveries. And she will also, she said in her chapter, get more feedback more often from students. So I felt from reading her chapter that she had made some important changes in her perspective, in her mindset, in her view of her teaching, and seemed that she had a more motivated approach now. So that was one example. I wonder if is it Retabile? Are you there? I wonder if you'd mind sharing just the issue or problem that you started with, and maybe just the questions that you then had when you did your research last year. Do you mind? Retabile?
The challenge I had was, I teach in-service teachers, and there is one module that I teach which has, it's like, we call it Introduction to Research. At the end of that module, they have to submit a written report, what we would call a research report. There's also the oral part where they would talk and say, this is what I did and this is what I did. But when it comes to now the oral part, they were doing quite well. Their teachers, they would be confident, they would explain the things they did in their classes to try and improve whatever aspect of language they were dealing with. However, what would always disappoint would be the written reports. And when I checked with my other colleagues who were teaching other modules, I found that in general, academic writing is a challenge. I had my own impressions at that time. Either they are careless or whatever, they shouldn't be at university and stuff like that. But after we had conversed with my mentor, I then asked questions. The first question that I asked was, I needed to find out what their understanding of academic writing was. And through that questionnaire, I found, and focus group discussions, I found that they had many different views of what academic writing is. It therefore dawned on me that it was unfair for me to expect them to perform at a certain level when the very understanding was not even, there. And so we had to change, and I had to try and show them what I thought academic writing entailed. Then from there, I asked them how they would like to be supported. And they gave me different ways, different suggestions as to how they felt it should be done. They talked about, it would be nice if you model what you are saying. It would be nice if you if it is possible to have a dedicated module just for academic writing, because in my department, we did not have a specified module called academic writing. We sort of expected them to come ready.
Yeah.
And so on. So we went through that process together, and we worked together to try and produce better pieces of writing.
Yeah, and thanks, Retabile. That's very good to hear that real example, as well as Annette's example. And that process of, I suppose what's common between Annette and yourself is I'm sure you tried many things before this process to improve the situation, but you started to see things in a different way. Is that fair?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, it was more of irritation at first.
Yeah.
But the discovery made me change the way I viewed them, the way I understood, so on.
And what we find I've worked with teachers in different parts of the world, like Latin America and South Asia, India, actually more than Africa. But what we find in both of those places is that teachers find that just that process of seeing things, they start to see things in a new way, and in itself that can have bring about an important change. Because you described irritation before, and of course many teachers feel demotivated or irritated about problems, but what teachers often discover is that they have these assumptions about what's going on in classrooms, which, if we start to look under the surface, if we start to explore the situation, are not always the case, or we start to understand things from students' perspective more. I think that's what happened in your case, trying to find their perspective, what they thought of as academic writing. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Fretibile. So we've seen two examples now of teachers starting with a problem and with through dialogue with your mentor. So that's very important. Your mentor can talk with you about your situation, and they will probably be asking you questions to understand your situation, but also they'll be asking questions to probe a little bit, to go a bit deeper maybe than you normally think about it, and asking you why questions, for example, or why do you think they do that, or why do you think the students act in that way. And sometimes you'll find that you'll say things like, I've never thought about that before, or I think that this, or it seems to me that, or maybe this. So these points where you are not quite certain, you're not quite sure about the answer, will turn into good questions, good research questions. These are things that you can take forward to find out more. So if we just go back, I'm going to ask some of you actually in a minute about your problems, if you don't mind sharing, and we can have a dialogue together now, just to show how this dialogue might be and how it might turn into questions. So if some of you could prepare yourself for having a conversation with me, that would be great. But I'm going to refer you also, apart from that book, which gives good examples from Africa of teacher research, I've written this book with Paula Rebolledo from Chile called A Handbook for Exploratory Action Research. And what I'm talking about today, about developing research questions, you can find in Unit 4, especially in this book. And here was an example from Latin America. We did these things in posters, with posters. A lot of the teachers are worrying about students seeming to be not very motivated. And some of the teachers got together to look at this question together, how to motivate my 10th grade students to work during my class. Now, the important thing is, of course, we can ask other teachers, what do you think? How can I motivate my 10th grade students? That's one thing we can do. We can go and say, we can go ask other teachers, or we can go and read ideas that other people have about how to do it. But the problem is that other teachers don't actually know my own students. So the ideas, and the further away from my context that the ideas are from, maybe the less appropriate they might be. So instead of immediately thinking of changing how to motivate new actions to take to motivate students, we are recommending in this exploratory action research kind of model, recommending that you first explore your own situation, and from that, good ideas might come. So in this group, let's just see what questions they decided to ask, what research questions. Before before finding new answers, new actions. So what are the activities that they like the most? What do my 10th graders, what do they do during the class? What do they expect from the English class? How do I react when my students don't work in the class? Because these were things that this teacher or these teachers were not sure about. So that's just one example, another example. So then, I mean, I don't know how they found the answers or tried to find the answers. Probably could be a questionnaire, it could be by interviewing some of the students or other things. We'll talk about that in the next time we meet. But the point here is that from a problem of my students don't seem very motivated, we've changed it into an overall question. How can I motivate my students? But before jumping into action, new actions, we are going to explore the situation with some questions that are going to explore things that I'm not sure about as a teacher. So let's go over to you, and I know that you've got puzzles and problems. I can see some of them on the list here that Harry gave me, but I'm not going to shout these out to everybody. I'm just going to ask some of you maybe to have a conversation with me. So I'm going to ask you about your problem, and we'll see if we can come up with some questions from our conversation. So if you don't mind, it would be great if you could all switch on your screens so that we feel that we are together. So I'm not going to use the PowerPoint right now. So would anybody here, any of the teachers, not the mentors, it could be mentors, because we're all, we are all teachers, aren't we? We all have issues in our teaching. So any of you actually, would you like to share a particular issue you're facing in your classroom? And I'm going to be like a mentor and have a kind of conversation with you. Would anybody like to talk to me about the issue that you've?
It looks like GB's hand is raised.
GB, yes.
So thank you so much, Harry and
I remember.
Richard. Yes, I am from Senegal. Yes, thank you so much for remembering.
What kind of students are you teaching, GB?
I am teaching students of the secondary cycle, age between 17, 22.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The particular problem I have is that in the schools here in Senegal, they ban the use of smartphones.
Right.
And I have noticed that my students, they like their smartphones so much.
Yeah.
And when I try some activities with the smartphones, they are so engaged.
Yeah.
Now I'm trying to have a paper or something like that just to convince our school authorities to accept smartphones in the schools.
I see.
Yeah, this is really my question. How can I get to that point?
Yeah. So yeah, many teachers complain about students using their smartphones in the class, but you're different, aren't you? You want to find out how to use them positively.
Yeah, because why I want to let them use it, because I know that we cannot avoid it today.
Yeah,
it's the trend of life.
Yeah.
Every adult is using a smartphone.
Yeah.
And the students, we train them to be good adults.
Yeah.
It's sure that in their life, in a point of their life, they will need their smartphones.
Yeah.
And from my own experience also, because I started that when I had the chance to go as a Fulbrighter to the United States.
Yeah.
And there, my first problem was that everything was on my smartphone. As I came from Senegal, I did not have the habit to check my smartphone before going out of my house. I would go and wait for the bus for 10 minutes or 15 minutes before it comes. And at that time, I had the possibility to check from my smartphone and know when is the next bus arriving to the bus stop.
Okay.
I didn't know that. I missed the first online classes also. Why? Because they sent messages on my smartphone I didn't check. I
Okay.
didn't have that habit. I say, oh, wow. So if we're not training our students, if we're not allowing our students to use their smartphones,
Yeah.
if they have the chance to go out, they will be blocked.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
why that idea came. And then as a research project, I developed that idea
Yeah.
about working with smartphones.
Okay, so GB, I can understand why you want to use smartphones, or why you want to find a way to get smartphones being used in the class. It sounds like there is a problem with your school authorities. So who says that they can't use smartphones?
School administration, the
Right.
principal.
Yeah, and what are their reasons? What reasons do they give?
Most of the time they say is the students waste their time with their smartphones.
Yeah.
They going to bad sites,
Yeah.
or they watching bad videos, or
Yeah.
they are using it to cheat in
Yeah.
exams.
And
Yeah.
what basis to what reasons? I mean, how can they say that? I mean, what do they know? How do they know that happens?
Most of the time they don't tell you how. They just say, oh, this is the way, because in the most of teachers report as students cheating with their smartphones. That's what they say.
So they
But
say
they
that,
never give you a proof that, okay, this time this student, you see that. But
yeah,
anytime they see a student with a smartphone, they keep they just retrieve the smartphone. And this is something I can't understand. And I went to the principal, the vice principal himself.
yeah,
I talked to him,
yeah,
and he said, I know that it's very important to research, to work, to learn. It's really very interesting. I know that they need it, but unfortunately, they are not using it effectively. And I say, how will they use it effectively if we teachers, we don't teach them how to use it effectively?
good point. You said, I know you said I can't understand. You just said I can't understand. I know you meant that as
I
kind
can
of
stop. I can stand.
I can't stand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you said I can't stand. Okay. But I mean, one thing. I mean, because one thing perhaps to find out as a question would be to find out more about why the administration, what their reasons are. What they say about, what do they say about students' use of mobile phones. That would be one way to explore the situation a bit more, perhaps. Yeah. So it could be possibly there's something to find out more about there.
Thank you. I will try.
Well, I don't know if that could be possibly. But also, it sounds like in your case, you would like to find positive reasons
Absolutely.
why, it's not a problem in the class, it's a problem in your mind, as it were, that you would like to do something, and you like to find some evidence. So sounds like maybe, what do other teachers or what do other authorities say about smartphones and how they can be useful? Sounds like that might be part of your research. So Gilby, thanks for sharing that. And it's a really interesting issue, really interesting problem. I can
Thank
see
you.
that Robert from Cameroon, would you like to share your issue? You have your hand up.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah.
Greetings from Cameroon. So my problem is actually in my classes, I've realized when I moved I teach in secondary schools, and I also teach some students in some private universities here. And what I've realized is that when I move to some classes, especially the higher ones, I realize that my learners can read and understand, but when it comes to listening, they will always perform poorly.
Right.
But I don't know, it's a problem. The text, the words, they know the words, they know the text. If I bring it into a reading form, they're going to perform well.
Okay.
But if I transform it into a listening passage, it becomes a problem. So that's actually my worry. And
Okay.
I want to carry out research to know what I can do for them to be able to also listen.
Okay. So thanks, Robert. So it's like your overall concern is you already turned it into a question of how can I improve their listening skills, right? How can I bring their listening skills to match their reading ability? So that's your overall how can I question. Let's explore a little bit. So what do you think are the reasons why they find listening difficult? What do you think are the reasons?
I think that the problem is at the level of the pronunciation, the accent, maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
Yes, the fluency at the level of the speaking, because most of the listening passages I give them from like native speakers, if I can say so. And I feel like they can understand it when it is from like people who are native. So what can I do? And I feel like my learners are not going to spend all their life listening to people just from their country. They're also going to listen to people from all over the world. I feel like I once took some of my students to the UN DP here, like it's an NGO, and they had a conference that it was a web conference with students from Pakistan, Canada, and then New York. And when they asked questions to my students, when it came to their turn to speak, they were unable to say anything. And they have their education in English language. Those were those who have their education from primary to, they were in like say grade 7, which is called from 5 here, grade 7, 9. And they were unable to follow the questions and answer, and I felt a little bit bad. So since then, I'm like, what can I do to match the reading skills of my learners to their listening skills?
Yeah, I understand. So I can see it's a good issue. It's an important issue for you.
Form 5 would be year 11 here, Richard.
Yeah, year 11.
Right. Year of secondary school,
Yeah, I see. About 13 or so. No, about 15 or so. Yeah, 15 years old. So Robert, it sounds like you've got some theory, you've got some idea about why the reasons might be about they're listening to native speakers who are too fluent, or it could be that, it could be pronunciation. Yeah. Okay. So you said maybe. So I'm just highlighting that is an area of uncertainty for you, which could become a question. Like, so what do students say are the reasons? Maybe what do students say are the reasons for? Well, how do students feel about listening? That would be a good open kind of question to find out. What do students say are the difficulties for listening? Could that become a question for you? Maybe the reasons. And it sounds like you're also reflecting about the native speaker accents on the things that you play them. Why so why do you play them? Why do you give them listening with native speakers? What are your reasons for that?
Actually, my reason for giving them that, I feel like you can be speaking, that is a language that is used in the environment, but it's also, people also use the language, they should be able to listen to people from abroad, because some of them at the end, they write full exams to travel to the US, Canada, and pursue their studies. Others did IELTS exam to be able to pursue their studies abroad. And then when they get there, they are stuck because they actually, that listening is a problem to them. Also, I feel like even if you remain here, you need to be able to face happening around the world using English language. And you're not only going to get people from Cameroon speaking all the time, you also get people from all over the world speaking, and you need to be able to understand what they are saying. It's the same English language. Why should you not understand what they are saying? It's the English you've been reading every day. It's the English you're using to write very well. Your texts are good. I understand what you say very well, but why can't you listen to somebody speaking? That's my main worry.
Okay. What do you? I just want to ask one more question. What do you feel about? How do you feel about having your students listen to speakers of English from other African countries? How do you feel about doing that?
Yeah, I have done that. I've tried that. With that, it's so easy. They get it like when I
Really?
put the Nigerian movies in my class. Oh no, there's no problem with them.
Oh,
They
okay.
get the Nigerian movies very well.
Yeah.
But my problem is most of them after terminal will come to you. I'm taking the TOEFL test. I'm taking the IELTS test. But there they will never have that Nigerian as a speaker. Even if it's a Nigerian as a speaker, the accent wouldn't be the Nigerian accent I know. So it would be something different. And yeah, that's my worry.
Yeah, I understand. Unfortunately, the testing is not changing fast enough, is it? And I guess we need an African TOEFL really to maybe that's a project for Africa.
There is quite a variety of accents in the IELTS test, Richard. It's not, yeah, the IELTS spoken test draws from Indian, African, and all over. It's not particularly native speakers. And even in the UK, I have spent a year with Chinese students here who never really got to interact with native speakers because 99% of the university is people from all over the world.
Yeah. So we don't have much time, Robert, today, unfortunately, but I'm sure you'll have longer to talk with your mentor. But one question that you might discuss is, why do you, something about your own choice of listening material, and why do you choose native speakers, or why do you choose, how much do you choose African speakers? And it's something about your own attitude, your own perception. It's quite interesting to me that the students understand the African speakers, the films, etc. That sounds like a good thing to me, to build on anyway. I'm not going to recommend how you should be teaching, of course, but it could be something to look into, as your own attitudes towards using, or the school's attitudes, or maybe to using British or American speakers versus African speakers. So thanks Robert for sharing that. So
thank you very much. Yeah, and I might just want to say that in as much as Harry says they're not always the native speakers, the accent Harry is using isn't the accent that is used here. I can confess that it's not just what people are using all over here. So it's a bit different. Sure. Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Thanks both of you actually for sharing your issues bravely in front of everybody. And I'm not going to go on for much longer, but you saw that we were discussing, talking about the situation, thinking more about the situation. The question is basically, what do you still need to know? What are you unsure about? We're sure about some things, but there are things we don't know, and these become your research questions. So in the book, a handbook for exploratory action research in Unit 4, you'll see that what's most important is that dialogue with your mentor. Together, you'll come up with some good questions for your own situation. But we found in with teachers in Chile and other places that very often the questions seem to be in these three groups, and they're very often this kind of question. So I'm not presenting this to you as a dogma. I'm not presenting this to you to say these are the kinds of questions you should ask, because everybody is different and everybody's situation is different. But quite often these kinds of questions come up for teachers. There are, I was just talking with Robert about his own perceptions. So he might what do I think about, what do I feel about using African speakers as listening material? Could be one of his questions. You know, you can explore your own perceptions more deeply than normal, because the point about this exploratory action research process is we can step back from our problems and reflect on them in a new way and actually try to answer questions through getting some data from students or from other places. Why do I think something happens? You know, why do I think students don't behave well in the class, something like that? And even clarifying a bit more than normal, a bit better than normal, your ideal situation. So what do I want to see happening? So for example, with Robert, because we were just talking, he would like the students to be better at listening, but you might ask, do I want to see the students understanding completely as well as they read, or almost as well, or half as well? You might want to clarify your ideal situation in your own mind. So we can often explore our own perceptions by talking with others, or by reflective writing, for example. We'll talk about that more next time we meet, how to answer questions. Today we're just thinking about what are your questions going to be. We often find also that very often questions are about others' perceptions. So what do my students feel about something? We saw this with Annette, we saw this with Retabile, finding out more about what the students think or feel about the situation is very, very useful. But also you can ask colleagues, what do my colleagues think about this issue? Could be useful. Depends on your own uncertainty. For example, with Robert, what do my colleagues, what do my school authorities think about the use of smartphones? Could be important to understand the situation better. Finally, these both about perceptions, but there's also behavior and observing a bit more objectively than normal what actually happens. So you may think that something happens, but if you're not quite sure, which students in the class are displaying a particular behavior, this can be very useful to actually ask more precisely about how often does something happen, when does something happen, and who is involved. I've got, I can think of a good example where this teacher in Nepal, actually, she felt very overwhelmed by the problems in her large class because she felt the students were sort of very noisy. And when her mentor asked her, so which students? Is it all of the students or some of the students? She really wasn't sure. It just was an overall impression that the class was too noisy. We often say that, don't we? Oh, that class, it's too noisy. That class is too noisy. But actually, if we look more carefully, there are reasons. There are particular things going on in the class. Not everybody is noisy. So she discovered actually that it was the students sitting near the windows who were creating a disturbance. And she found out by asking a colleague to observe her class. And they noticed that it was the students by the windows. Why? Because they were looking out of the windows at other things happening. And it wasn't just that, it was that they were talking with their neighbors about what was happening outside the window. So the reason was what was happening outside and what the talk that was going on about what was happening over on that side of the class. So that helped her to understand it wasn't the whole class is noisy. And she then actually did something very simple, which was just to move around more when she was teaching and to move closer to those students in that row so that they wouldn't speak so much. And that did help her situation through understanding it better. So, as I said, we can think of, making questions in this kind of way, but I think dialogue with your mentor is the best way to start, and just then maybe to look back and check by looking at this. Example here. This teacher wanted the students to speak in pairs in English. They wanted the students to speak in groups and pairs in English, but they weren't doing that, they thought. They weren't sure really, actually. So this teacher example, in what parts of the class do I think students speak to me? Why do I think it's important for them to speak to one another in English? What do my students think about this, others' perceptions? In pair work, which students do and don't speak in English? In pair work, when do they start speaking? When do they start speaking in English? Because you can ask positive questions. If students seem demotivated or unmotivated, you can ask, well, how do you feel? What is demotivating for you, but also what's motivating for you? You can ask positively like that as well. So basically, I just invite you to think of your own research questions going forward based on what we've done today. I don't think we'll look at that, but you can look back at your questions and think, how specific are they? How measurable are they? And there's something in the unit there to help you about that. But I think I'll stop there because I don't think we should go on too long past the hour, should we, Harry?
Thanks very much, Richard. I think we're fine to go a few more minutes if you want to ask questions here, and if you.
Okay. Well, shall I just share that last part of the slide?
Yes, please. Yes.
I think it could be useful. So, just a minute. Sorry. Can you see that? Yeah. Sorry, I'll just go through these. Can you see this still? You can still see this? The slide? Harry, can you see this?
Yes,
okay.
I can.
This was just to say that we can, when you've got some research, when you've got some questions, you can together think about how good are your questions. I mean, good questions are basically whatever is going to help you to learn more about your situation, be useful for you going forward, and but is possible to answer. And that's something I think your mentor can help you with. So this can be useful, and maybe measurable means, is it possible? Is it going to be possible to answer your question? Because some questions we have are just impossible to answer, like, I don't know, why don't ministries of education provide us with a better salary or something? It's important. It's a very important one, but it might not be possible to answer it. I don't know. That's not a very good example. But anyway, these are good. These are criteria of quite good questions. So study oriented means focused on your own issue, focused on your own topic. So you've got a topic, you've got a problem. You've narrowed down your different problems into one issue. So are your questions relating to that? We'll have a look at a couple of examples in a minute. Is it going to? Are you able to measure? Are you able to assess the answer? To get the answer, are they accurate? Are they going to be precise enough to get a good answer? Are they realistic? I mean, are you realistically going to be able to answer the questions? And are they focused on your topic? Well, let's have a look at some examples finally. I don't think the first one is a very good question. It's what affects my students learning English? It's too broad, it's too vague. It's not really measurable. When do my students use English to communicate with each other? I think that's more focused, it's more precise. It means you could make it even more precise by saying at what times, at what points in the class, because this teacher is interested in pair work and getting students to use English to communicate? So when do my students use English? I think it's quite a good question. Number 3, good or bad? Why don't my students learn? Number 3 is a bit too broad, very vague. Number 4, how many times my students use their dictionaries when doing their homework? It's a good question. I mean, this teacher is interested in the homework and in how well they use their dictionaries, but it could be quite unrealistic to try to answer the question because the teacher can't be there, you can't observe them unless you ask them the students to say. So it could be better to say, how many times do students say they use their dictionaries? How can films promote my students' motivation? It's quite broad again, it's quite vague. But how often in my lesson do my students work in pairs? Again, that's quite a good, precise question. So I just say that to encourage you to, with your mentor, to look at your questions carefully, because good questions can really bring you to a new understanding, like we heard at the beginning from Annette, from Retabile. It can bring a new perspective on your classroom when you try to find the answers. And we'll talk about that next time, how to find answers. And questions are really, the important thing. It's worth spending quite some time together thinking about what are the good questions, what are your questions going to be? And as a mentor, trying to really help your mentee, your teacher, to have questions which you can imagine as a mentor, which will be productive for them. And I think personally, we can discuss this. Personally, of course, try to let your teacher come up with questions themselves, But being a mentor, I think it's not always about accepting or encouraging your teacher to think for themselves. I think sometimes you can be quite directive. This is my experience anyway. And with research questions, of course, have this dialogue. You need to understand your teacher. You need to understand their context. You need to try to find out what they are not sure about, because that's the starting point. But based on that, you can, I think, suggest questions to teachers and ask them. You don't tell them you must research this, but like with me and Robert, or me and
Paula?
Earlier, I was kind of suggesting we didn't have much time. That's why I was being very pushy about you could have this question, you could have this question. But basically, I think you can be giving advice, not just accepting or what the teacher is saying. I think because you can imagine better what's going to happen, how they can find the answer or not, and what questions could be really useful. Personally, I found that questions which involve finding out students' perspectives are very, very productive, very useful for getting new perspectives. Anyway, I'll stop talking in case there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Richard. Any questions? We will take 2 questions if we have them. Folu just said his issue has to do with negative attitudes towards reading, particularly literary texts on their own. But anyway, that was just his investigation. Not particularly. That's a question that we would discuss fully. Would build on this presentation to discuss that when we next meet. So that's. But any questions in relation to what Richard was talking about in terms of thinking beyond just or thinking carefully, asking questions before you start trying new things?
Yeah, this is exploring, isn't it? Exploring the situation before trying out new things. So this is why we call it exploratory. Well, this is the thing that I've developed. Exploratory action research. I don't know if you are following this, or all of you, or And
I think the silence is because it was very down to earth, Richard, and I don't think, I'm not surprised that there are no serious questions now. I wish we had so much time for everyone to, like, I can see Fulo already put the problem he's dealing with, and I wish we had enough time for everyone to put the problem, and then we reflect on it as we've done with the others, but we can't do that in this session.
Well, I tried to keep it down to earth, as you said, because I think that's how it is, you know, how it can be. And I think you said right at the beginning, although some of you have PhDs, etc., you know, this is a different kind of approach, if you like. It is a down-to-earth approach. It's a practical approach, and we call it research because I think it is a kind of research, and I think that we should democratize research. That research isn't just for university people, but it is a down-to-earth and practical, useful kind of research that we're talking about. We don't need to use big words, I think.
And am I right, Richard, that the book you and Paula published is available online free?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And the best way to find it is just to Google a handbook for exploratory action research. Yeah.
Thank you. I've also just shared on the WhatsApp group the collection of research reports that you and Amol and Deb did in Nepal, India, and Bangladesh.
Yeah, I know you like that book.
Yeah, it's my favorite. And it's very down to earth.
Yeah.
And we shared that with mentors as well.
Okay, yeah. You know that, okay, I'll just share the link for the handbook. You know that for mentors, because it's interesting, some of the teachers are themselves teacher trainers. And, you know, so you'll be interested in how you can mentor others to do teacher research. And I think the best way to start, of course, is actually to do your own teacher research. So that's great that we have teacher trainers who are willing to research your own practice, because we are, as teacher trainers, we are teachers, aren't we, ourselves? We can research our own practice. That's exactly what some of you are willing to do. But anyway, if you are a mentor, or if you are a teacher, a mentee this time, but maybe in the future you will want to mentor others, just like Retabile has decided to do. There is another book which is also free about mentoring teacher research, how to mentor teacher research. So I've just put the link for that into this chat as well. It's called Mentoring Teachers to Research Their Classrooms. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you very much, Richard. Thank you very much. In the absence of any questions, maybe we would we just say thank you again, and we have our next webinar on the 7th of October. Is it? 7th or 8th? I can't remember. Yeah, I think it's Friday, 7th of October. Yeah. We would send another link. But between now and then, we expect our colleagues in mentees to have developed their research questions, exploratory questions, and discuss those with their mentors. So they would be coming to that next webinar with a set of questions, because that webinar would be around developing tools to investigate their research. Yeah, so we'll try and work with our individual mentees to support them to develop their questions before then.
Yeah. So Yusreya asked, do we have any homework? So
yes.
I guess that is the homework.
Yes, that's what I just said, and which your mentor would reiterate. Yusreya, your mentor is Dr. Judith Hanks. I met with her today, and I don't know if you've started communicating, but she will be getting in touch with the next step of your work soon?
Yes, I did. I communicated with her. Thank
Oh,
you.
great. Okay. All right.
I'm just joking with you, Yan.
Oh,
All right. Okay. All right. Okay.
Because I didn't talk, so I just
Oh, yeah.
delivered my comments to say that I'm here.
Great. Great. Thank you.
yeah. Judith is very enthusiastic about exploring.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exploratory practice. So
Yeah.
yeah, she'll be a good. Yeah. Anyway, you've all got good mentors. So
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, if I was giving you homework, I would say read my book, Unit 4, the handbook for exploratory action research. If you want to follow up about the kind of approach to developing questions that I've kind of introduced, really.
Yeah.
Yes, I will, inshallah. I will do this.
Okay.
Richard has shared the link, so you can click on the link here. But I would also follow this up. I will download it and share in the WhatsApp group in case some of you have difficulties.
Okay. Yeah, Unit 4 especially, and then if you can have you've decided on your research questions together with your mentor before the next session, that would be great. Because that's October the 7th. Then you can relate what we talk about to your own questions, and you'll have another discussion with your mentor maybe after my webinar and about what you're going to be doing. And that will be, you'll be setting off on your journey of exploration.
Great. So thank you again. Thank you very much, Richard. I think we would call it now. Again, I'm very proudly holding up my copy of the no, that's not mine. That's actually one of the mentees from last year's copy, which I'm supposed to post to her in Cameroon. But I also have my copy, and I'm hoping that we would have a copy like this in the next couple of months from the work that we would all be doing together. And it will be time again. We'll definitely have a big webinar or a big online event to celebrate this with you, Richard. Thank you so much.
That's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Where do I stop recording? Oh, yeah.